local source for live meetings. The Government Channel presents
Welcome to Straightforward Conversation with Gary Hunter. My guest this evening is Hub Burton, Associate Vice President for University Relations at Ohio University. Hub joined Ohio University in 1993. He's worked on development of the Ohio Sports Network, the worldwide web efforts on the campus, and a number of communication strategies for the university. Mr. Burton is also a member of the Athens Bicentennial Steering Committee, and tonight's topic is the Athens Bicentennial Celebration. Welcome, Hub.
Thanks very much, Gary. Good to be here.
As I indicated, the topic we're going to talk about tonight is the Bicentennial Celebration. I'd like you to just start off by telling us how the committee got created, why it was created, and we'll go from there.
Well, back in February, I think it was the mayor's intent to put a group together that could take advantage of the historical fact that in 1797, Ohio country, it sort of became a little bit easier to access the Ohio country, and as a result, 11 substantial men is what they were called, came at the direction of Rufus Putnam into the Hockhocking country and settled Athens. And so 200 years later, the opportunity exists, obviously, for Athens to celebrate the settlement and the 200th birthday. And Mayor Abel wanted very much to put something, I think, concrete in place. And so we put a committee together that I think brought some interesting people to the table. Verda Jones is the chair of the committee, and joining her on the committee, myself, George Bain from Libraries, Bob Daniel, former history professor at Ohio University, is also there. Guy Phillips, the Goods, Gail and John Good are also members. Joe Priestley, a really good cross-section of people. Don Stout, also a member, that bring a lot of different talents and expertise to the daunting task of trying to organize the celebration for 200 years.
Have you've researched this on the 11 stout men that came to Athens?
I have. Bob Daniel has been just fantastic. He actually has a manuscript in place called The Village Years, a study of Athens up until about 1920, which is currently under review by the Ohio University Press. And a lot of his research has gone into providing us with the background necessary to try to document a lot of the important dates in Athens history and really put those in front of the community and sort of create some awareness.
Being a Plains boy, let me give you an old wives' tale they tell me out there and see if you can confirm whether it's true. The old wives' tale goes that the 11 stout men that you're talking about first visited to settle Athens and settled at the Plains area being flat, and later came back and were too drunk to get any farther than the Athens River Valley.
I don't recall seeing that in Bob's manuscript, so that may have to stay a part of local legend and lore for now.
What is the actual mission of the Bicentennial Committee that has been formed?
I think it's twofold, Gary. I think the first mission that the committee had was to take a look at the potential activities and events that could be included in a schedule, a year-long celebration. And I think the second was to serve as a resource for the community, to invite people in the community, if they had ideas, if they had input, if they had something that they wanted to offer or contribute, or if they wanted to participate, to be the resource to allow them to come forward and become a part of the celebration. And it's really sort of, I think, worked in both those ways over the course of the past 8-10 months.
What did the committee do? Who formed the committee? Was it the mayor?
Mayor.
Mm-hmm. And what have you been doing in the last like 8 or 9, 10 months?
Well, it's been an interesting process because if you sit down and you take a look, I think, at what some other communities have done when it comes to bicentennial celebrations, it's everything from developing a logo to putting literature in place to scheduling events to fielding requests to doing the research to coordinating a variety of different marketing and licensing opportunities. So I think one of the first things that took place was to give the committee and the celebration an identity. And Don Stout and Tad Gallagher, who's a designer at Ohio University, spent a lot of time putting together a logo which represented, I think, in many ways what the community has been and wants to be, and basically assigned that identity to the committee and to the celebration. Taking it from there, it was really, I think, the task of trying to develop a schedule, events that would be appealing to the community, and at the same time create awareness amongst the community as to what the heritage of of Athens really is. It's an interesting history, and as many people that are new to the community because of the university may not have an awareness of that. Perhaps those who have been here for a while may not have absorbed as much of that possibly as they could have, and so that's been an interesting offshoot, and that is to find events that create awareness and raise some I guess you'd say awareness of the history.
Give me a little preview of the background of Athens. It was settled by, I believe, New Englanders for the most part?
The Ohio Company, Rufus Putnam, and Revolutionary War veterans, basically operating out of the Boston area, had the idea that the Ohio country offered tremendous opportunity. And up until the time of the Revolution, expansion from the original 13 colonies had not really extended too far to the west. But immediately following the Revolution, visionaries and their eyes turned west, and indeed that group ended up in Marietta, and ultimately from Marietta sent those 11 substantial men, actually sent surveyors to the area in 1795. And in 1795, those surveyors came to the area and actually settled upon 2 what are now townships to host not only a settlement but a university, and those were what are today Athens and Alexander. And then 2 years later, the settlement was established, and then 3 years after that, Putnam himself came to Athens, what is now Athens, and laid out the plat of the village, and from there, Athens began to grow. And it's an interesting history from there that includes everything from the first courthouse being built, how the community began to develop, draw newer populations, how the community, for instance, reacted to the announcement of the Civil War in 1861. And these are some of the things that are going to be included in a series of bicentennial flashbacks that we're working on. All the way through to Lyndon Johnson coming to Athens and delivering the Great Society speech in the 60s. So Athens, while some people may feel it's not on the way to a lot of places, actually through the years has turned out to be on the way to a lot of places.
Is it true that Athens was on the Underground Railroad route during the Civil War?
The proximity, and it's an interesting point that you raised, the proximity of the Ohio River and Athens to the Ohio River, and indeed this area to the slave states, it was a very active Underground Railroad route for slaves making their way out of the South, eventually north to both New England and Canada. And so that's an interesting part of the history. And indeed, one of the components that's being planned right now for February is a discussion of the African-American contributions and history as a part of Athens, and that's in the planning stages. And a part of that will highlight the Underground Railroad and the role that Athenians played and local people played in making that happen.
There's another story of being a local native around here. I've heard a lot of the different stories, but that Athens wasn't always known as Athens, that there was another name that was known as, and that name was Middletown. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Again, I defer to Bob Daniel, who's done so much of the research, but yeah, part of the evolution of Athens was that it not originally in the plan. Because of, I think, the location of the university here and because of a variety of other influences, especially from those founders of the Ohio Company, I think ultimately Athens became, obviously the name of the community, but just one of the many sidebar stories that I think people will have an opportunity to appreciate over the course of the next year.
What are some of the names of the 11 original settlers? Are there still members of those families still here in town?
There are. I'd be hard-pressed to give you actual names as they may exist now, but there are people in the area whose forefathers and their families did come to the area originally. And indeed, Athens has for some time had a First Families celebration, which takes place in the summertime, usually in August. And it celebrates those ties, those connections that remain in place even today. Long after, obviously, the first settlers have come and gone, many of the families still remain. And that celebration is a part of the bicentennial schedule of events and celebrations, and promises to be one of the more interesting aspects, I think, of what's going to go on in 1997.
Interesting. Stay tuned. Hub and I will return after this commercial break. Welcome back to Straightforward Conversation. My guest this evening is Hub Burton, a member of the Athens Bicentennial Celebration Committee. Hub, before the break we were talking about the activities that were going on with the Bicentennial Committee. What kind of a budget are you working under right now, or with, or hope to work with?
Been a community effort, to say the least, and I think it started with a commitment by the city to be realistic about trying to support the efforts of a bicentennial committee, which was basically starting up from scratch. From there, I think there was the generosity of those groups in town and, excuse me, in the community that have always been there, and very generous for the Oblenis and Athens Foundations to very seriously consider their support. And then everything from those particular groups to people offering things in kind to an anonymous gift, which is sort of intriguing, that the Bicentennial Committee received. The person did not want to have their name revealed, but again, I think someone who identified the value of assisting in that way.
So how large a budget are you working with?
Oh, I'd say it's anywhere in the neighborhood from about $10,000 to $15,000, yeah.
So most of the activities you plan are going to be free for the public to partake
I think
in?
so. I think that's the idea. If there is any marginal cost, it's to try to recover the cost of materials and labor and time and that sort of thing. So as you look down the list, most of the things that excuse me, exist on the schedule are wide open to the public and designed to create access and create opportunities for people to participate.
You've whet my appetite now, so tell me some of the events that you've got scheduled for
Well, one of the
this year.
things I think that's of interest is that a local church is still in the final stages right now of trying to put together plans for a, I guess you'd say, commemorative service, which will recreate the dedication service of that particular church in town from the early 1900s. Following that, in February, as I mentioned earlier, there are plans to put together a lecture outlining, or I guess I should say highlighting, the contributions and the early lives of African Americans in the Athens community. The real kickoff, excuse me, comes in March with a ceremony designed to take place at the city building to unveil commemorative plaques which will pay tribute to those mayors of Athens who have come before, those people who've offered guidance excuse me, and leadership. And so that's scheduled for sometime in March, I believe, very early on in March. And then as you take a look at April, there's an Ohio Association of Historical Societies and Museums regional meeting scheduled for the area. June, a concert under the elms, that very popular series at Ohio University, will be presented in a bicentennial theme. Some teleconferences involved with people searching for genealogical roots and that sort of thing. July, the AM Rotary will present a bicentennial production in association with the July 4th celebration. August, as I mentioned, the First Families celebration, as well as Summer Serenade. And then as you go into the fall, October, for instance, the Homecoming parade at Ohio University will have a bicentennial theme. There's a bicentennial ball scheduled for October, later on in October. And so, as you can see, a wide variety of events, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one particular effort. Gladys Galloway has stepped up to prepare an educational component to be entered or introduced into Athens schools, again, to try to create an awareness and a sense of heritage amongst the students in the area, too. So a lot of different events and initiatives underway. It's planned, for instance, that banners will be placed on the light poles, as there are now for the holidays and that sort of thing, but banners commemorating that 200-year history from the first settlement in 1797. Those are planned as well, and those will be going up. So the bicentennial will take over in a fairly big way here, I think, once 1997 gets underway.
Is there going to be some sort of a large ending ceremony or something as the year draws to an end?
I think where the budget stands at the end of the year may have something to do with that. And I think one of the things that may dictate whether or not there's that culmination of the celebration will be what sort of momentum and stamina we still have in the community by the time we reach September, October, November. The holidays in December are a little bit tough to get people, I think, focused, and that's why I think we've waited until after the holidays, 1996, to get into 1997 a little bit to really sort of rev this up, is to give people an opportunity to recover from the holidays and really start thinking about the 200th birthday of Athens.
Is there anything in the works to create some sort of a permanent memorial situation for Athens?
Well, as I
beyond
mentioned,
just doing scheduling events for the year?
as I mentioned, there are the commemorative plaques in the city building paying tribute to the mayors. I think there's also obviously an ongoing exhibit at the Historical Society. Joe Priestley and the Historical Society do a very good job of, I think, riveting people to their past. And so I think the whole process will produce, whether it be publications, whether it be events that linger in people's minds. I know Don Stout's been working very hard on a walking tour for the downtown area, which will document and illustrate areas of interest for people downtown. So a wide spectrum of activities, I think, will leave an imprint, even if there won't be something concrete to do that.
You mentioned earlier that you'd spent quite a bit of time working on a logo. Are you at liberty to tell us what the final design looks like, or when it's
Certainly.
when it's going to be unveiled?
Certainly.
Or-
I brought a copy with me this evening, and you may or may not have an opportunity to take a look at that. But what I think Don and Tad really sought to do was try to create an image that brought a variety of different factors together, both past and present. The images, for instance, of the early pioneers, very much the focal point of the logo. The idea that the same sunburst that illuminates the state of Ohio seal would also be a backdrop, making that tie, obviously, between Athens and the state of Ohio. The dates are obviously on there. An open book, which has a lot of different interesting connotations, not the least of which is obviously the educational component, with Ohio University being here, but the open book, obviously, for the future. And the sky's the limit, I think, kind of feeling for Athens. Federal stars on either side commemorating the fact that it was the federal government that actually sold the territory and the land to those original members of the Ohio Company. So again, a compilation, I guess, if you will, of a variety of different factors to put into that one logo to try to bring a lot of different elements into that one focal point for the celebration.
I know that off and on over the years that I've been the law director for Athens, there's been some discussions about why Athens doesn't have an official flag and so forth. Is there any thought given that this logo might form the basis of a lasting flag for representing the city of Athens?
Whether or not the logo actually, again, becomes the symbol for the flag is an open question, but one of the things that has been discussed for 1997 is conducting it's not a contest, I guess a project, you would say, from amongst local schools and art classes to contribute what they can to the development of a city flag. I know that the city has some plans to incorporate the logo into the badges on the force for the year, and whether that stays or not, I don't know. But yeah, I think that the bicentennial is a unique opportunity to bring some of the things to the forefront for consideration, whether it be badges or flags or whatever.
Very interesting. Stay tuned. Hub and I will return after this commercial break. Welcome back to Straightforward Conversation. My guest this evening is Hub Burton, a member of the Athens Bicentennial Celebration Committee. Hub, we've talked about all the events that you're planning on scheduling, how the committee was created, and some history of Athens. How do you intend to get all the word about out that you're going to be all these things you're going to be doing?
Well, I think that's a real challenge, because when you take a look at a bicentennial celebration, in some ways, Gary, I think it'd be easier if you had one monster celebration and could direct all of your efforts to focusing the spotlight on that one event. We're, I think, a little more ambitious as a community in seeking to have this last for an entire year, from January all the way to December. As I mentioned earlier, we have a variety of different events scheduled, hopefully spaced out throughout the course of the year, that it's not going to be difficult to keep people focused on that. But if for some reason someone were to just show up in Athens and not know it's the bicentennial, we have plenty of things planned, I think, to keep them posted. One of the more interesting things that I think people can look forward to is the appearance in both radio and in local newspapers of a series of bicentennial flashbacks. And Bob Daniel, George Bain, and Joe Priestley are sort of our board of review as far as historical accuracy are concerned, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention their efforts. But they have basically, along with an intern at the university, Laura Richards, identified 52 significant events, and certainly there are more than that, but 52 significant events in the history of Athens, and developed 30-second spots for radio and a couple of paragraphs for the Messenger and the Athens News. And those are going to appear beginning January 6th. And I think if people have the opportunity to focus on those or tune into those or glance at those, they'll find some interesting things out about the community that they might not know. And I think it's a very useful tool for the committee to keep the bicentennial celebration in front of people for a while. Another element that I think is going to be very interesting for people to keep an eye out for, a series of biographies that, again, Bob Daniel is researching and putting together for the Athens News. And so it's not just events, it's really, I think, giving people an up-close and personal look at some of the interesting personalities, interesting characters, and famous people who've either passed through Athens or been a part of the Athens community. That'll take place, and of course we'll be putting together quite a bit of publicity around each individual event as it comes up on the schedule. So with all of that, I'm hopeful that we can keep an awareness of the bicentennial celebration and the history of Athens in front of people for 12 months.
I assume it's not insignificant that there are 52 weeks in a year and there are 52 articles that are being prepared.
That had crossed my mind, and we did make that connection. And you know, it really wasn't much of a reach to come up with 52. I think at the beginning of the project there was some concern that 30 maybe. But we were, that group was still going strong as it reached 52. And, so as a result, there are no gaps or there are no spaces. It's all interesting, and indeed, taking a look at the copy the other day, it really, in its sum total, gives you a pretty good overview of some of the real highlights in the history of Athens.
When will the first one be, like the first of January or something?
First one will run, hopefully, beginning the week of January 6th. And for the next 52 weeks, a different, I guess you'd say, view or vignette of Athens will be available, and I think they're going to be interesting.
Certainly sound like it, and probably collectors' items for people that are...
Yeah, and the process of that, I think, would not be an unwelcome addition to the Historical Society and the library and some other things. It's nice, I think, in 1997 to have the opportunity to sort of update things. And one of the things we are seeking to do is I think people have a temptation in thinking of bicentennials and thinking 100 and 150 and 200 years back. I think we're going to try to incorporate some things which happened in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and right on up to the present day that are obviously a part of the record, too.
I was at least told, I think, somewhere along the line that there was the possibility of a new park being developed. Is that in the works, in the thought process? Or?
Well, it's been mentioned, it's been discussed, and the location of that down along the Hocking River, somewhere in the neighborhood across from White's Mills, has been mentioned. Not as familiar with some of the ins and outs of what would carry that project or not carry that project, but that has been mentioned, the idea of a bicentennial park. And that would be, again, as you mentioned earlier in the program, one of the more lasting, I think, benefits or byproducts, I guess, of the bicentennial celebration.
Well, we have a couple minutes left, and in that couple minutes, tell me a little bit about the homecoming activities that are going on with Ohio University related to the Bicentennial Committee and, of course, the ball that's going to take place in
Well, Ohio University and Athens are intertwined and have been from the start. Even as Rufus Putnam sent those 11 substantial men into the Hocking country, the idea of a university was very much at the forefront. And as a result, those two histories, as I mentioned, are very intertwined. So I think it's a natural connection for the university and the community to come together in the celebration of the bicentennial. Along the way, some opportunities for the university to participate. Even though it's Athens' party, Ohio University is obviously a part of the community. The homecoming parade, as I mentioned, is going to have a bicentennial theme. Athens, 200 years, a look back. And I think the students, by participating in that, are going to gain an appreciation for the community that they're a part of 9 months out of the year. Or 8 months out of the year. They're going to have an appreciation they might not ordinarily have for that community. Along the way, we've also been touching base with the athletics department. Great visibility for Ohio athletics these days, and I think it's a great opportunity to give increased visibility to the community through the athletics department. So some things are being discussed there as well.
Very interesting. That's been a very interesting discussion we've had tonight. This has been a discussion with Hub Burton of the Athens Bicentennial Committee, and this has been Straightforward Conversation with Gary Hunter. And good evening.